welcome back to Enlace After Dark. I'm your host, Art, and joining me, as always, is my wonderful co-host, Terry.
Hi, Art. It's good to be back. Hello.
It's always great to be back with another week of Enlace After Dark.
Yay!
Sorry for missing out on week one of Enlace After Dark. We had technical difficulties. I'm not going to talk about that.
No, we're not going to talk about that Black Week.
No, but what we are going to talk about is dystopian fantasies.
Yes,
Is that right, Terry?
I am very excited to be talking about that. I'm going to go full nerd on
Yeah,
this
this
one.
is your genre. This is your episode.
Yes, and I'm especially excited because it's not only my favorite type of fiction. I actually managed to talk to a professor here at Texas A&M about this very subject. His name is Professor Jackson Ayers. His main his main research is usually with British literature. He covers a lot of topics with British literature, and he even had a lot to say about dystopia, especially when it comes to George Orwell's 1984. I don't know if you've ever read that book. Art,
No.
have you heard of it at least?
I've heard of it. I have heard of it.
And I think he says that too, that a lot of people have heard of it. Even if they've never read it per se, they've at least, if not heard the title itself, at least have heard references to it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you see, if you've never seen The Godfather, you at least know, references to it in, TV shows and movies.
Or how all childhood people and kids know the little gang S or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The 6 lines, the arrow, and then it makes the S.
Basically. Well, Jackson Ayers, unfortunately, the original idea that I wanted was for him to come by and to have an interview with us as a guest.
That would have been interesting. That would have been our first professor on podcast.
That would have been amazing. Unfortunately, he is out doing research, but he managed to get some time out of his busy schedule to answer a couple questions that I did send him through email, and I will be busting them out every now and again. So when we do continue talking about it.
All right, well, Terry, what is dystopian fantasy? What are we going to be referencing a lot of today?
Okay, well, for those who don't really know exactly what dystopia is, I think it's it's a type of society where it's, for the most part, it's under some kind of oppressive control.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of different from I guess you could say post-apocalyptic worlds where in a post-apocalypse, pretty much humanity and society is completely wiped out.
Right.
Nothing
but
is there.
But this is some sort of future where peace is the goal by any means plausible.
Yeah, it's with post-apocalyptic things, something wiped out everything, and with dystopia, the thing that could have wiped out humanity, an answer came to it, but that answer wasn't exactly something you wanted.
Okay, so kind of like The Giver or The Hunger Games.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, and so speaking of that, that also brings me to a question. We did have great examples, which a Hunger Games that you mentioned, and The Giver is a good one, and those are definitely YA ones, because I think you remember in the late 2000s, early 2010s. I think
was in middle school when The Hunger Games was coming out, and it was big, and I remember being I don't get the hype about this.
That's what I was gonna ask, but yet there was still hype.
Oh, yeah.
And you even have things that come out now, like the adaptation of The Handmaid's Tale, which is on Hulu.
Oh yeah.
And then you have Black Mirror, which every episode is a different kind of scary reality that has to do with, kind of similar to dystopia.
Yeah.
So what do you think makes it so popular?
That is a great question. I think it really does come down to the kind of world that is crafted or created, because, I think at the end of the day, what a lot of us want is that kind of perfect reality where, war, infighting, disease, plague, everything in between is eliminated. But the reality is, what cost does that come at? And I think that's always the interesting thing, at least for me, is to eventually learn through the book, the film, the series, whatever it may be, what was the cost that was paid. In example of The Giver, all the people gave up their emotional freedom, and they're all single-minded essentially, and they stick to the goal to keep that peace. And then, The Giver is a single person who has that ability to retain all that and all the history and know what it is and what they're supposedly, keeping away from reality.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a good one. And honestly, I think like especially young readers and actually readers of all ages, they really like intense plot twists
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, and they like these and for the most part with dystopia, they have realistic characters. Like it could be like people like you or me, like being in these kind of situations and stuff. And they have to be forced to, if they want to put an end to all that's happening in the world they're living in, they have to do all these things. And for the most part, like with a lot of dystopia, there's not really a happy ending. There's, I guess you could say, a realistic ending, but yeah, like there's for some, like if you think of a,
Yeah, I mean, The Giver kind of had a happy ending in the movie.
well,
Kind of.
but what about the book?
I never read the book.
No. Well, I mean, it's fine. I mean,
I haven't read any of these books.
Yeah.
I'm putting a disclaimer out
oh,
there.
that's fine.
Yeah, I've seen a good chunk of the dystopian movies. You know, I've seen like The Maze Runner.
Oh,
Oh.
okay.
Oh. Oh.
Okay.
Hi.
It looks like we are having
We're having one of our videographers, Trey, joining us for this
Yeah.
improv too.
Just so you know, like when we talked to Trey about what we wanted to talk about today, he did seem excited.
He
so
was very excited about this.
One of my favorite topics here.
this
Sorry, headphones are free. So I got really excited.
Can
And
we
I
get a
was just
mic
saying some
check on
stuff
Trey
up.
real quick?
No, we should be good. We're doing it as we go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
We planned it all out because I was in the back, like, oh man, I kind of wish I was a part of this one. And he was like, just go up. I was like, okay, so.
Yeah, but now you're kind of.
All right. So Trey, since
I
you
am.
came,
I'm right here in the middle. Hello, my name's Trey. There won't be a nameplate. But trust me, my name's Trey.
all right, Trey,
you know,
since you were
real quick, it's been a bit since we did have you on the show. Trey, what is it that you do around here in Lhasa? Because as we know, Terry is like our scriptwriter and editor for that aspect. I am the video editor. What is it exactly again you do around here?
I do all the video work, so setting up all the cameras. I'm normally in production in the back there, listening to y'all and setting everything up. I do lighting. I
So
do a little bit of everything but editing.
Videography and production, pretty much, is
Yeah,
where you're at.
that's
Okay.
my
Yes.
big thing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess back to our regular
Yes.
schedule.
So Trey,
program.
you were
Yes.
so excited
was-
to come over here. What do you have to say about what we're currently talking
Well,
about?
I know you were talking about. So the last thing I heard, because I took off my headphones quite a bit, and then we were talking about how we're going to do it all. So I might be a few steps behind on what you were talking about.
Okay, well, we were last talking about dystopia
Yep.
and characters,
Yep.
realistic endings, but
Mhm.
then Art was talking about The Giver, which he hasn't
That's a
read.
great one.
I
Yes.
never read the book. I haven't
Yes.
read any of the books, but I've seen the movies of like The Giver,
Mhm.
The Hunger Games,
Mhm.
Maze Runner, and Divergent.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I can't think of any others that I might have seen or watched, but I did sort of watch The Handmaid's Tale. I saw at least episode 1, so I know what's going on with that. And an old coworker of mine was so into the series.
Wait, there's a show?
You didn't know about The Handmaid's Tale?
No.
Yeah, there's a show like on Hulu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm gonna go home and watch that.
Yes.
Oh my god, yeah. I started Gotham.
Oh,
But that's not just.
that's not really
that's not
dystopia.
dystopia.
And
Yeah.
we
But,
actually
like,
did.
I'm totally putting that show on pause to go watch that because I'm a huge fan of dystopia.
Yes, it's a really great one.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can try to summarize it as best I can. With Handmaid's
Without
Tale,
spoiling.
It's a story in which a world where society is falling backwards, where they're forcing women to no longer have their rights and they're
Mhm.
oppressing them into how would you best describe? I would think
Like, it's kind of a
colonial
sensitive topic, just so you know.
practices. Yeah.
so like they're kind of basically forced to like, let's just say repopulate. That's one of the things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Okay. That's wild.
It's a very dark reality that they live in.
yes,
It's very
which
dark.
honestly, I kind of think that's how a lot of dystopias are. It has to be like a dark reality, and
Oh,
they can
yeah.
actually be based off of real life fears. And I actually have something that Professor Ayers told me about it. Like, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, about real life fears. Due to the nature of dystopian fiction, which is often set in the future or within alternative histories, readers and critics tend to believe that it's an extension of science fiction or fantasy. However, such projections work most successfully when they are reflections of the reader's actual world and their lived experiences.
Yeah.
And he even used 1984 as an example. In 1984, George Orwell, the author, set the scene in future London, which is described as a bombed out city and an organized society that revolved around 3 super states, which in there it's Oceania, East Asia, and Eurasia. And his depiction of this oppressive control and the state's surveillance, it kind of resonates with the situation in the UK following the Second World War, which that's when George Orwell like created that book. So yeah, so it's even though it's set in future 1984, it shows the world as it was during his time. And I kind of feel like that's how a lot of dystopia is. It's kind of like our real life fears, like with stuff that goes on, like that makes just good dystopia.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the message behind The Handmaid's Tale is something of fearing of what is actually occurring today without even necessarily addressing it fully, which is scary.
Yeah.
That is, yeah. So, where are you gonna take this? Because I have a
well, we can.
depending on what you're talking about, I'm gonna have some input.
Okay. Well, I'm like I said, I was bringing out stuff that our great Professor Ayers was mentioning, and he had a lot to say when it came to 1984. And for those who haven't read it, it's a story which again it's set in fictional 1984, and it's during a whole war that's going on, and it seems like it's going to go on forever, and pretty much everyone is under surveillance. But the government's keeping everything under surveillance, and it's being dictated over this figure called Big Brother. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term, Big Brother. When you hear Big Brother is watching, that is definitely one.
Oh, wasn't this a movie too?
It was.
Yes, it's also a movie.
Yes.
Oh, that's where that clip's from.
Yes, and he even says it. Although 1984 wasn't the first dystopian novel, it's arguably the most important because not only has it influenced other works, but it also remains an integral part of the genre, with traces of the images and themes from the novel being in other dystopian works such as The Handmaid's Tale and Hunger Games. Because yeah, you've seen Hunger Games, like they're all under surveillance while they play these like terrible games.
Well, not even that, they're also under surveillance just in their everyday lives. You see it in the second movie where they just have cameras everywhere.
Pretty much, yeah.
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 That was crazy.
Yeah, so I definitely recommend if you haven't read the book, definitely read George Orwell 1984. It's one of the very few classic books I've read.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't read that. I've read the other dystopias that are more not more
You've
well
read
known,
more
but, like,
recent works.
more mainstream, I guess.
Well, we were talking about like how Hunger Games, it came out for him it came out in middle school
Yeah,
and
not the
stuff.
same.
Middle school
Yeah.
for us.
Well, you guys are around the same age, so. And yeah, that was like that whole craze. There was the Hunger Games, there was Divergent, and then would Maze Runner count as a dystopia? Because didn't everyone?
I would classify it as because it is sort of a government style, throwing them in the maze and making them want to come out.
It was set in the future. All the kids had their memories erased and forced to run the maze, and whoever solved the maze or whatever was the smartest of the bunch to come up with a cure to save the world from whatever virus was infecting it.
Okay, so there was a world still going on
Yes,
while all
there
that
was a
happening.
world, and
Okay.
they were
Because
they were being watched by an organization.
Yeah.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if that was set in the apocalypse or not. Because
Kinda.
when they did
But
escape,
the
didn't everybody
apocalypse did
happen?
influence the creation of the Maze Runner program.
I would say it's more towards the end of the apocalypse. Like the world's already kind of gone. You see it a lot in the second and third movies. A lot of it's just desert, and the Earth has already really taken over. What was originally it?
Yeah.
And there's few scenes where you see affected people. I guess they're kind of like zombies.
Yeah.
Kind of, sort of.
Right. I know that's not the term they use in the book, but to give like a visual aid, I would say they're kind of like zombies.
They're kind of like zombies. Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the movie, it was kind of a crazy way of seeing them. But yeah, no, I really liked Maze Runner. Was probably one of my favorite ones. I read the books.
Maze
And
Runner was a good one. At least the first movie.
I've only seen the first movie.
I've seen all.
I've heard mixed reviews about the last few movies.
Yeah, because
we're not talking about reviews. We're just talking about the whole story behind it.
That is true.
Yeah. No, one of my favorite topics here.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people see it and they're like, "Wow, look at this story," but it's the government side that interests me. Like, what leads the government to make it do such things to its people?
Yeah.
Like, they always try to justify it with it was for the survival of mankind or something.
Yeah.
But they're always finding another group that has found another way.
Yeah, I think that's usually what starts most like dystopian fictions is like they're trying to do what they call solving like an issue that could mean like the world, like the end of the world or something, like without getting too political or anything. Like if say like
The Giver, how they
like The Giver.
selected the one person to contain all the memories and history and all of that
That's
of
tough.
all the records.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rest of society gave up their freedom of emotion, and so they just were analytical workers.
Well, they didn't even know they gave it up.
Yeah,
They were kind of just born into it, and it was
yeah,
this
for
is
the
the
entire
way.
time, like when the father was in the movie trying to kill the little kid.
Yeah, and he didn't even know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he just assumed that it just went to sleep forever.
Wow.
Because they had no emotional or real recognition of the concept of death because they gave up all that freedoms.
Would you say The Giver is your favorite of dystopian fiction?
No. My favorite is I'm pretty sure this is a dystopian novel. I don't remember the title. I read it back in middle school.
Okay, well tell us the plot at least if you remember.
I'm gonna try to recall it.
I'm really trying to recall it, but we went to two very different middle schools.
They were like across the street.
I'm trying to remember here. Trey, you look crazy.
I know.
Production man, away.
I'll be right back.
He's being. Yes, we're still talking.
It was set in this future reality where essentially society had already collapsed,
Mm-hmm.
but there were like small villages of people that were rebuilding society almost, and it followed the story of this one little girl in this village who had the rarest color of clothing, which was blue, right? And I know this is my favorite, but I hate that I don't remember much of it because she goes on this adventure and journey to go find out where the color blue like came from because that's where her father was from, but she never knew who her father was.
Oh my god.
Oh.
And so she leaves her village to go find that and then to figure all that out, and I don't remember. And
Okay.
again, it's set in an already destroyed world, but
I wouldn't say that's a dystopian.
That's more
fiction.
it is
post-apocalyptic.
something more post.
But I know what you're talking about. I read it and I can't remember the name
I
either.
know, it's such a good story.
It's because we have the same education system.
Oh, well, a recent one I read, it's kind of messed up. Like, it's not like the YA novels that you've probably read, but it's definitely a lot more dark. Like, this one is called Tender as the Flesh. I don't know if you guys heard of that book.
Oh, but that sounds good.
It's really intense. I don't think it's for everybody.
Is that the one about cannibals?
Yes, should we talk about it?
We did talk about it before off podcast.
Yes. Okay. So trigger warning. It does talk about that stuff. If you heard art.
I didn't hear art, so
Cannibalism.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, he said cannibalism just for
Okay,
anyone
so
who
the reason
didn't hear them because
We
I
already
barely
gave
heard
out
them the
trigger
second
warning.
time.
Stop it.
Yes.
Yeah, I barely heard you the second time.
Okay.
And because it does talk about that, I'm not going to go into too many details about that for one reason, and also in case you do want to read it, I'm going to stay away from spoilers. But basically what happened is that there's this disease, and it's never clear if it was an actual disease or not, that basically affected every animal in the world. And because that happened, meat didn't become available. So,
so humanity loses that source of protein and other vital nutritions.
Yes. So basically, it now became okay to eat humans, and so much so that there's even humans that are bred specifically just to be eaten. Yes. I love your face, Trey.
Trey, this is.
I think I've heard of that book. I'm sorry?
You're the one into dystopian. Trey.
I know.
That is like a very brutal.
I'm gonna read it.
Yes, it's a very great book. Again, it's Tender as the Flesh. I don't remember the author because it was a book originally in it was from a Latin country and it was translated from English. So
okay.
Yes, I'm trying to remember what country and the author too. But yeah, it's a great book if you're fine with reading that kind of stuff. So yes, I do recommend.
I'm gonna go try that book.
Yeah, I read it, and yeah, it's a definite page turner. It's like one of those books you're like, oh my god, I'm very disgusted, but I need to know what happens because it's really crazy.
No, I remember hearing about a book like that a long time ago. I just never knew the name of it.
Would
So-
Ender's Game constitute as a dystopian future? Or dystopian fantasy? Ender's Game.
I don't know. The government's I mean, they're recruiting children for the military.
Like, did it or did the world not end?
The world
Well-
never ended, but they were on the constant brink of war with
Okay,
the
so
alien species.
so far a good
That's-
start then.
That's how it makes it sound like at the start, but at the end it flips. We were never in danger.
Yeah.
But that's
all right,
also-
hold on. Right before we continue this conversation, I might just spoil this movie trying to decipher if it's in this
Okay,
genre
so
or
this
not.
one we are gonna spoil only because there's a little bit of debate. 'Cause I feel
Ender's
like with
Game
some
came out
dystopia.
back in 2013.
Okay, going back to
Well, you
what
should have seen it by now. If not, go watch it.
going
Yeah.
back to what you guys said about like if there was an actual real fear, I feel like that's how it is with some dystopias. Like, and with the one I just mentioned too, there could be like this fear that wasn't an actual fear. It could have just been something that they, created just to.
Right, because
make
there is
this-
no war in Ba Sing Se.
There is no war in Boston. Exactly.
do
No,
you mean?
because going back to
Yesterday.
going back to
Oh, right.
1984, George Orwell, that book, there is a forever war that I did mention between
Mhm.
three superstates, but there's also implication that there is actually not a war, that it might have been made up just so they can have control and the government can survey everybody.
Right.
Yes.
Some propaganda right there.
Exactly.
hmm
Well, then I guess you could classify it, Ender's Game, as dystopia future. But
As a dystopian fantasy.
yeah,
Because again, the humanity in the book discovers the bugs. The bugs
Mhm.
attack a human colony or something like that, and then
and they attack Earth.
they come in to attack Earth. We repel them, and then the government utilizes wartime powers to enforce military mandate and military service within the youth, so that way
Mhm.
they can discover potential leaders
Mm-hmm.
and the brightest minds early on. And so they find Ender, and then they trick Ender into playing all these wartime games,
Mhm.
which
They're
are
not games.
actual Sims. They are actual people that these kids, preteens, teenagers, are ordering
Well, he's like
around.
16.
Hmm?
He's like 16 in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the literal kids and teenagers ordering around the thousands and millions of lives that are going out into space to do all these defensive missions or offensive missions too, where they're assaulting the bug colonies through simulations.
Yeah, they told the
Ah.
kids, it's just a game.
These are all
You're
just
fine.
games.
Oh my goodness.
And they were actually commanding a real fleet attacking.
Yeah,
Oh shoot.
and you can imagine how many people are on each
So-
ship, on each little fighter, in each level of every carrier, cruiser, and destroyer that they sent out there.
Wow.
Yeah,
I gotta
Yeah,
read-
it's wild.
I gotta read that. It's a book also?
It's
a
like
ver-
12 books.
It's like 12 books.
Oh, okay.
But that's including like a lot of these mini series that went along with it, because I think they
Mhm.
shift focus in some of the other novelizations off of Ender and more onto his sister in a few books.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Okay.
depends.
But the movie covers like 6 or 7 books.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
yeah. The
Okay.
movie's good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
I think if you want to read the books, it will take a while.
Yeah.
And of course, I always recommend reading the books, but
Yeah.
this is one of the few times where I like just watch the movie first.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can. If it's available to me, I'll watch it definitely.
It should be.
Oh, and
Hopefully.
going back, we made that one little reference. Like, there's no war in Ba Sing Se.
Yeah.
Would you think like the Earth Kingdom with Avatar: The Last Airbender, like with Ba Sing Se, would you think they were kind of living more or less in a dystopia? Kind of.
Well, let's see.
They kind of had elements to it.
No.
Well, think about. Hold on. Remember, the king of Ba Sing Se never knew of anything occurring outside of the First Wall District. It was always the Dai Li who told him that everything was okay, and the Dai Li, being the super secret government agency that they were,
Mhm.
always manipulated everything in the background,
Yeah.
and prevented anything from happening.
Mhm.
So I think that there were dystopian elements for sure in those few episodes when they're in Ba Sing Se and the
Yeah.
Dai Li are doing all that.
I definitely think they were kind of living in, even though it wasn't affecting all the world, it was affecting them per se. I think they were more or less turning more of a blind eye with
Yeah.
everything because, yeah, you even said it, their political thing was corrupted but they didn't want anybody to know that. That's why they did the whole brainwashing thing. With
they did do
there-
brainwashing.
Yeah, there was literal brainwashing, which you could definitely see in a lot of dystopia.
There was tampering of evidence as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was corrupt. The little secret agency part.
Yeah, there was even the weird little drone tour. I forgot her name. Like where they would have like that weird smiley lady who would like show them around. I forgot her name. Like they would like
escort or whatever her name was.
Yeah, and then they would replace her and stuff. Like, welcome to Ba Sing Se.
There is no war in Ba Sing Se.
Yeah.
I remember that now.
Yeah.
I was trying to recall what you were talking about because I haven't seen that show. Well, I've finished it all in like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I never really recalled much
if
of
it makes you feel better, I got into that show real late. Like, I didn't even watch it when it was out. It's like on Nickelodeon.
It's a good series.
But I want to bring up Korra.
The Legend of Korra?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the Steel City. Would you classify them because they can't isolate themselves?
No, that's just an isolation.
Okay,
country.
never mind. We'll move on.
City.
That's still a good show, though.
Terry, what is your favorite dystopian?
Well, I really liked the one I mentioned. Tenders of the Flesh is a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard read, as I mentioned, but it's still great if you do want to have a good, brutal idea with that. 1984, it's definitely a good one. And I'm going to bring up Professor Ayres one more time because he even says it is relevant. And yeah, he says with George Orwell's novel, it provides readers with many metaphors and concepts that he developed during the 1940s, like during World War II. And these includes the terms Big Brother, thought police, and doublethink. And these terms and elements, they're still relevant to current events and society today. And we see them in debates about surveillance and technology, free speech, and the media industry too. And that's a really great book because you see this character, it's set it's in the perspective of a certain character who wants to fight back the government, even if he does something very small, like saying in his journal that he keeps, like 2 + 2 = 5. Like, it's obviously wrong, but that's his way of, like, rebelling and stuff, which is why that is a really great book. So, and I really do think it's still relevant today when it comes to, like, a good example of, like, dystopia.
Right. And you, Trey?
Maze Runner.
Maze Runner?
Maze Runner.
Yeah. Yes.
You?
I'm going to go with the first movie of Maze Runner. Yeah.
Ooh, I like the second one more.
I don't really recall the second, third film.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, the first one was really good. You know, they introduced the whole thing and then they left it on the big cliffhanger. It was really interesting.
I wanted to bring up a show. I don't know if you saw it, but I don't know if this would classify as dystopia. But Man in the High Castle.
You know, I had remembered Man in the High Castle, and then I was completely blanking on it the entire time. I was sitting here thinking about
that's classified as a dystopia.
So Man in the High Castle.
It's a good show. Very slow start. You have to take a few episodes to watch it.
Trey still hasn't finished it, and as the one who has finished it, Man in the High Tower is a alternative history series in which during World War II, the Allied powers didn't win, being the U.S. forces and other Western countries. No, the Axis powers ended up winning. So Japan and Germany won World War II. And so now we're living in a world controlled by the Japanese and the Germans.
Oh.
Yes, and it's set in originally it's mostly set in, it flips between West and East Coast America because West Coast, so like the California area, that's all under like Japanese control. And as you move further inland there, you then get into neutral or like territorialist area. And that's where you can find, people hiding out in no man's land. Whereas on the East Coast, so New York, Florida, and all those are under German control. And so the two countries have managed to somehow separate the world in half in a decent sense. And it's very interesting because right off the bat, when the series just started off, it's still at a point where Hitler is still actively alive and ruling the German party. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
And it's again an alternate history where that happens, and a small rebellion begins to spark up, and the main protagonist that we follow through accidentally gets dragged into this rebellion and then finds herself, becoming more embedded with it. As the U.S. hasn't died out yet. The U.S. is still fighting strong in its own little ways against the Japanese and the German powers. But they're small, they're tiny, they're beaten and they're battered.
Yeah. Oh wow. And it's what's it called? A man who
Man in
Man in
the
the High Castle.
Man in the High Castle.
It's High Castle.
Was it High Castle or was
It might
it
be High Tower. Look, it's gonna be one or the other.
I'll look up both.
Look up both. Just look up Man in the High.
Yeah.
And then it'll pop up Castle or
I don't
Tower.
think that'd be a good idea.
Oh. Yeah. It depends on your search history.
Okay. Well, speaking of search history, I think Art's looking it up real quick.
Man in the High Castle. I was wrong. Trey was right.
Thank you.
There you go. He checked his sources.
And you finished the show.
Yes, I did finish.
I'm still working on the show.
I finished it. Look, I might not remember the name of the series, but you know what? I still remember everything that happened in that show, and it was a
I was
great
gonna
show.
say, like, I think what we learned in this episode is that Art's not good with names.
Not always.
No.
Not
Not
always.
But I do gotta say, I was the one that got him into the show.
Okay.
He got me
gotcha.
He
into
did
it.
beat me in finishing it,
Yeah.
but I
And-
was the reason.
Yeah. Trey isn't big on the slow burn stuff. I am.
Yes.
Like,
I
it's
could
nice.
do slow burns.
It's a
kind
real
of.
slow
It
burn.
depends. I don't know. So one thing I actually did, what was interesting, I had talked to a friend of mine about this, and even my mom at the same time, and because they didn't really know what dystopia was exactly. I think they've heard of it, but they didn't know what it was
What
technically.
For sure it was.
And then my mom, when I did explain it, she was like saying like, "Oh, so kind of like COVID." I'm like, "No, it's not like COVID."
Not like COVID.
But then it just made me think of like just me being very weird. I just started imagining things like, oh my god, but what if like a dystopia thing did happen with COVID? Because that could have happened if it gotten
That could have
worse.
been a cause.
Yep, which thank God it didn't. We're all safe. But like with
Yeah.
quarantine, maybe there could have been like a curfew. We could have been under surveillance if like we had to get out of like if we got out of our homes or something. So
I mean, in a sense, you could almost argue. God, do I go down this route? Because I was.
as long as you like you don't get like too political or anything,
I was gonna
it's fine.
suggest all the laws and policies that were made following the actions of 9/11 and all the like extreme wartime powers we had for like surveillance in the Middle East and doing stuff with that, and how easily like we were able to follow along in getting the Snowden case too.
Well, as we said, dystopia is based off of real life fears and
Right.
stuff like that, COVID and what you said, 9/11, those were fears that we thought were like, oh my God, does that mean like the world is like, as we know it is done or something like that? So
right.
Don't forget
stuff,
about 2012.
yeah. Oh, 2012, yeah. And 2012, that could have been like based off of like a fear, even though it wasn't exactly like there was logic to it. That was just based off of like what, like an old Mayan calendar, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah, it was based
That
off an
could
old
have-
Mayan calendar.
That
but
could have still created like a dystopia and
Mhm.
stuff. So,
Sparking fear in people to just, turn.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the
Exactly.
calendar did
Yep.
have another page, just we didn't understand it yet.
Yeah, like,
Yep.
oh, what's this? Oh, it does keep going. All right, false alarm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Another thing I want to bring up. Well, I have two shows. I forgot the name of one. I'm going to try to recall it, but I'm going to bring up the first one I do remember. Would you classify The Purge?
Oh, you know what?
Oh.
That's a good one. You know, maybe
I think
only
so.
because I think it would be because with
Would it?
I think maybe it depends because I've only seen like the first few. Like I
The
haven't
gen-
seen all of the Purge
Right.
movies, but
I mean, I never really watched it myself.
You
but
Pretty
with
good.
they say that the reason why the Purge happened is because I think there was like an increase in crime or something. Or
There was a massive increase in crime or something, and so the government decided, how about we make a day where all crime is free?
I
Free
think
game.
that would constitute then as a
And then
dystopia.
they allowed it to happen, and then what? Crime went down for the rest of the year.
Yeah, they said
Mhm.
that now because that one day where all crime is legal, yeah, all crime goes down because they can just save up for like the day they can just do all this with no problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would count it as a dystopia.
And then
stuff.
the last one was really weird. The last movie.
The Forever Purge, that's what it was called.
Yeah,
I never saw that one.
I did.
It was the one set in Texas, right?
Yes, which is really weird.
Do you want to talk about it? I mean, I'm fine if you spoil it.
I mean, it was really weird in the sense of like the context of the material. Again, being a Texas native and of my heritage, I'm of Hispanic, Mexican heritage, and all that jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like who you're following. You're following Mexican immigrants
Mm-hmm.
as they have to survive this forever purge. and it's really crazy to think about it because at the end of the day, um, it's a super like almost racist film,
Yeah.
because you've got, and I'd hate to label it like as it is, but it is what it is. You've got the white folk, rednecks, and all of that, racially profiling Hispanics and Mexicans through a good chunk of the film and going through it and onward, and it was a really weird film to sit down and watch, and being like somewhat relatable to those characters.
You know what? That actually brings up another thing with dystopia, and because I think The Purge does it too, with how like you see like it's the rich that are mostly like doing all these like heinous crimes because they can afford to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And with dystopias, you see like these rich people or even the government, they can afford to live in this dystopia, and like it's really the lower middle class and stuff, like they're the ones who have to suffer, like with the Hunger Games, like you especially
you really do see it in the Hunger Games
and
in the films.
all the people who are suffering and stuff, they're having to play the game, while the rich, they're watching all of it for sport, like it's like entertainment for them. That's why like with PETA and Cactus, they're like, oh my god, I really hope they like get together or something. They treated it like how we treat TV shows.
Stuff. And again, they show that in the films as well. And what, in the second film,
For
Katniss is pregnant.
Oh, that's the second film.
Yeah.
Second, no.
Where they
it's the second film
where they added drama because they were gonna do the next Hunger Game, but they did it with all the winners of the previous 10 Hunger Games, 13,
24, 12, 24. Because there's 24
districts.
There's 12 districts, but they send 2 from each district.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And they were like spicing it up with drama and stuff and flair and just doing all that to it, because again, they were rich and powerful, and they were, it's the drama that they wanted.
Yep.
And they faked their relationship after the game too.
Let's be fair, it was always fake.
It was.
No, it was real at one point.
Was it?
I think it was.
Someone's not Team PETA.
No.
No.
Well, I think he was better, but I just didn't see it happening.
I think she could have been better off with neither of them. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I mean, honestly, yeah. Because what was
Probably.
she, like 16?
Yeah.
They were all teens. They were all kids.
They
We're
were all
talking about
kids.
dystopian fantasy, and we keep jumping back to the young adult.
Well, I mean, remember
here.
that was like a popular thing.
Yeah, it was the popular thing at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen it. I've only seen the first Divergent. I feel like that one was like, out of all of them, though, that was the lesser popular one, even though it was still popular. I don't know.
So, personally,
He's about to step on some toes here.
It's entertaining.
Okay.
I do recommend finishing the rest of the movies, but you won't be disappointed nor think, wow, that was amazing.
Okay.
It's perfectly middle ground. We're like, that was good.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
That's your take on that.
That's my take on
Divergent. Okay.
It's perfectly in the middle.
Okay. If
I have no problems with it, and I can't really say I was like, oh, yeah, it was great.
If I have nothing else to watch that day, I'll watch it.
I recommend the other 2. I'm actually sitting through them, watching the other 2 at home this weekend.
Okay,
because my sister wanted to watch them.
Yeah, because I actually don't. I know it's a dystopia, but I actually don't remember what it is about. Wow. Hard.
What?
Okay.
So basically, it's Detroit.
Games-esque.
It's Hunger
not
Games.
Detroit. It's somewhere. I'm just gonna say Detroit. I don't think it was Detroit, but it might be Detroit. I just don't remember. It's a city encumbered by a wall.
Mm-hmm.
There is 4 factions.
I thought there was 5.
There might be 5.
I'm
There
pretty
was
sure there's
military, like law and like politicians. I can't remember the name of them, but I can remember the colors. So it was black, blue, yellow, gray. There was 4 of them.
5. Red.
It was orange. It was orange. I promise you. They were orange because they were farmers.
So then why do I remember red being on that list?
Because I think that was the Divergent. The Divergent is a 5th one, but they fit in with the other categories. So
Right,
that's why they
fit
get
in
hunt
under
them down.
all 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and to like indoctrinate yourself into one of those categories, you have to cut your hand and like spill blood into the pot. Man, I thought that was insane. I was like, that's a bit much, don't you think? For like a 16-year-old to be like, oh, I'm gonna do this the rest of my life. Cut. I pick you. But like, it's also kind of weird because they're like, trust the test, because before they pick what group they want to be a part of, they take a test. And they're like, this is what you're best fit for.
Yeah.
You could pick what's best fit for you, but you also have the choice to pick whatever you want. But they highly put trust the test, and like they let you believe you still have a choice.
Yeah.
But like they kind of brainwash you from so young to just trust the test and go with the test.
Gotcha.
Where you don't really want to pick anything else that the test doesn't say you fit in. You kind of see that when the main character goes in it and takes her test, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And she's like, but what am I supposed to do? And she just picks a faction, and it kind of follows on there. And she picks the faction where she's most likely to get caught.
Yeah, gotcha.
So it's her kind of, trying to survive, becoming one of them, and not trying to excel too much at being good, but to try to stay under the radar. And of course, there's multiple movies, so you can kind of guess how that turns out.
Yeah.
Gotta
But
rewatch those.
It's good enough to just watch.
Yeah.
And be entertained and be like, that was a good watch. And that's it.
Now time to go do my laundry.
Exactly.
Yes.
But you know what? I do believe that this might just be all the time we have for Enlace After Dark. This is a really great discussion.
I really like this episode a lot, and apparently Trey did too. That's why he showed up in in the middle of it.
Yeah, like a madman in the middle of our production.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I got super excited because I was listening to it. I was like, man, I should have been here. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go plug in a mic and just join.
And now you're here with us.
Yeah.
So we're happy you were here, Trey.
This was Enlace After Dark. It was great talking to y'all. It was great having this discussion with you.
Yes.
And our surprise guest, Trey, joining us today for this.
It was great being here. I might just pop in here and there.
Yes.
Every so
We'll
often.
see about
I've never planned to be on here. I just show up.
This isn't gonna be the last time we have him pop out.
He's flying off again like Team Rocket. This was Enlace After
Blasting
Dark.
off again.
Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch y'all next time.
See you next
Take care.
week.
Bye.
Bye.